Hey everybody, I'm Jason Mefford, and I am back with Brad Miller, and we are walking a spiritual path. So thanks for joining us. And today we wanted to bring up a topic that we've talked a little bit about before. And again, those of you that have been listening to us for a while, you're going to hear some of the same things because we don't get it the first time or we get it in a different layer with a different meaning based on the context where we're actually at in our life at that time. And so, again, because of that, you can go back, you can watch almost 100 episodes now. We were talking about that before we hit record. But today we wanted to bring up again the topic of ayni, which I know for some of you may be a word that you're not familiar with. It's spelled Ayni, Ayni, ayni. And it's actually a term from South America and Andes, Andean mountain areas. So think of the Incas. And it's a word that means today for you, tomorrow for me. Today for you, tomorrow for me is kind of the
Pretty sure I
meaning
heard that in
behind
Rent. I think that line
behind
I think is in Rent.
was that in rent too? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
So that's what ayni means, right? And I know it's a funny little word, but we wanted to talk about it again because Brad just had another experience with maybe a deeper knowing that kind of comes with that. So Brad,
Yeah.
why don't you share and let's get in and talk about it again today?
Yeah. So the idea of the concept of ayni is a little bit kind of like the idea of altruism. And this is a concept from social psychology. Back when I was in college, I was a psychology minor because frankly, wanted to try to figure out how to get girls to like me. So I wanted to learn
Truth.
how people thought. Yeah, so I wanted to learn how how people thought, how I persuasion and all these other things. And so that's kind of I think why I went there originally. But I actually pulled some things out of there that have been very helpful down the road and helpful understanding people and the way they act. But one of the concepts that we talked about in one of my classes was this concept of altruism. And altruism is giving, it's helping, it's serving without expectation of return. And so for those of you who kind of are a little maybe familiar with the concept of I need, it sounds very similar to that, where you're giving something to someone, you're serving, you're helping them, but you're not expecting anything back in return, right? The idea is it's kind of like you get your cosmic, or the universe will give you back, what based on what you give. But altruism is again selfless giving, essentially. And during the course of the class, one of the question that came up is there such thing as true altruism? Meaning, is it possible that someone can give, can help, can serve, or whatever like that, with absolutely no expectation of getting anything back? And being, kind of a cynical college kid, um, at the time, I'm like, no, there's no such thing as that. Like, there's always a reason why people are giving, or maybe it's a direct I give, so I expect you to give me something back exchange. Maybe it's that you want to try to win a favor with the person, so I give something to Jason with the thought that he's gonna like me more, or that down the road he's gonna give me something back in exchange because I gave first. Reciprocity that way of objects. Um, or maybe it's just that I know that when I help people, I get a warm feeling inside. And so I want to feel that warm, nice, fuzzy feeling inside again. So then to do that, I help, I give, I do what caused that feeling in the first place, right? So really I'm giving, I'm helping, I'm doing these things because I want to feel that feeling that I get at the end. And I think a lot of people volunteer for that very reason, is because it makes them feel good inside that I'm helping others. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if definitely by all means, volunteering is a great thing, giving is a great thing. But specifically, we're talking about altruism and whether, you're actually giving with absolutely no expectation. And as I said, after talking about it in class, I'm like, no, there's no such thing as true altruism. There's always something the person's trying to gain from it, right? And I kept feeling that. I mean, that's the way that I've kind of felt about the whole concept, that there's always something somebody's trying to get, even if it's an internal feeling or feeling better about themselves, an ego trip, whatever it might be, until I started walking on this spiritual path. And since I started walking this path, I now know that there is such thing as true altruism, that it is possible to actually to serve others, to help, to give without any expectation of receiving anything back. And as I told Jason, this is something I just actually kind of came to realize it yesterday. In fact, as I was driving home, that that was the case. Because again, up to this point, I always assumed like, oh yeah, there's always something there. What somebody's trying to play something. There's an angle. They're trying to get something at the end. But I know now inside that that's not always the case.
Hmm. Well, so what was it? I mean, what happened yesterday? If you can share a little bit more, because again, it's like, to have you kind of click into that knowing from yesterday. I'm guessing something happened specifically that made you all of a sudden go, "Oh, now I get it."
I was listening to a podcast on the car, and the podcast was specifically talking about this concept of ayni. Um, and as I was listening and obviously consciously processing what was being said, obviously subconsciously, I was also kind of processing it and kind of sitting with it. Um, and just something through the course of that kind of came out and was like, hmm, maybe what I've been thinking actually isn't right. Maybe, there is actually something to this altruism thing again, because it was the idea of ayni and altruism are very similar concepts. Maybe there actually can be such thing as just giving just for the sake or helping others for the sake of helping. And again, it was just listening to that podcast, something kind of popped and came to me.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting because I'm still learning, right? Because I think, for me, part of Ayni or part of giving in the way that we give, and we're not just talking about money. It might be money, but it's a lot of other things. And maybe we'll share some examples of that here in a minute of what it can look like. But I think it's a lot of it goes back to the intention, right? And so, like you said, from that class you took, and when you were younger, you're thinking, well, somebody always has some kind of a selfish intention, right? I want something for it, right? So as an example, when people give millions of dollars to a university or to a hospital to build a new wing, and it becomes the Jason Mefford cancer wing, that is
Hmm.
not altruism. That is not
Right.
ayni, right? Because you're
Hmm.
expecting something for what you're giving. Now, again, great, right?
Oh
You're
yeah, nothing
helping, you're
against that.
helping people,
Please, by all
nothing against
means.
it, but you're not, there's some other intention behind you giving more than just wanting to help people, right? You're
Right.
wanting to get a pat on the back.
Hmm.
And so, instead, if you had maybe if one had donated and it's anonymous and
Right.
nobody knows who it is, well, that more closely ties to altruism or ayni, right? Because again, you're just giving without any expectation of anything coming back to you.
Hmm.
And I know that it seems a little funny because again, in the 3D world, we're all very selfish. The Tanal is selfish. We're looking out for number
Hmm.
one. But that's why this concept is so important on the spiritual path, is so that we give up some of that selfishness and we do things from the right intention, right? Instead of, giving to get. That's quid pro quo, right? From
Hmm.
Latin. If I do this for you, then I expect you to do this for me. And that just is kind of a bad energy in general because it's kind of manipulating, it's kind of controlling, and it's conditional, right? And so again, we can also throw out the terms of conditional love versus unconditional love, right?
Hmm.
Conditional love means, I'll love you if you clean your room, but that's conditional, right? Loving someone, whether they clean their room or not, is unconditional. Loving someone, whether they're yelling and screaming at you, uh, is unconditional, right? And so
Hmm.
that kind of all ties into this as well. And
Hmm.
I think it's interesting because you can come to a point, and again, I'm not there all day every day, right? I'm still human living this experience.
Hmm.
But there have been times in my life where I really feel like I have done, the ayni. I have given of myself, have given money, time, talents, whatever it might be, in that unselfish, unconditional kind of way, without expecting anything in return for it. And so it's the same thing. It's like, growing up Mormon, they practice tithing, right,
Hmm.
which is giving 10% of your money to the church. It's an ancient, in a lot of different ancient traditions and religions as well. But there was always the joke, that you paid your tithing as a form of fire insurance, right? And it was a little joke because, those who didn't pay their tithing when the destroying angel came and burned and desolated everything, you would be saved, right? Well, if one is paying tithing as fire insurance, joke or no joke, then okay, they're helping the church or the whatever survive, but they're not getting the full blessings or benefit from the giving if they have that as an intention.
Hmm.
And so I think to me, especially it's where you kind of cross the line is when you're doing this out of love, just purely out of love. No matter whether the person accepts it, matter whether the person thanks you, no matter whether the person reciprocates to you or pays it forward. It doesn't matter, right?
Hmm.
But I think, for most of us, it's, when we get a gift or we give a gift, we expect a thank you.
Hmm.
But what if the person doesn't give you a thank you? Are you still okay with giving the gift?
And we give another gift to them next
What,
time.
yeah, will you still give again, even if they don't say thank you? And I think it's interesting because, we brought out the Carlos Castaneda books before. And so I know more of the backstory on that because I work with Don Javier, who actually was the apprentice to Don Juan. And he would always, there's a thing in shamanism where when you go to see your Don, right, you show up, you never show up empty-handed, and you show up clean and empty. And so what that means is, and it's a tradition in most ancient traditions as well. If you would show up to the elders, you would never come empty-handed. You're coming to them asking for blessings, asking for healing, asking for help of some kind. You never show up empty-handed. Even if it's something seemingly very little, you show up with something, even if it's a loving heart, right? And giving them love. But so, Don Javier would always show up with food, other things like that for Don Juan whenever he would show up. And he told me, he said, he never said thank you. He's like, oh, go put it over there. But it was a lesson, right? It wasn't that Don Juan wasn't grateful for it, right? It wasn't that, he was showing love because of the gift, but he was not saying thank you on purpose to teach us a lesson, right? To teach on Javier, a lesson is it doesn't matter whether I thank you or not. It doesn't matter if you give me something and I take it and I break it or I throw it in the garbage, right? It shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do with it, whether I accept it or whether I don't accept it, whether I say thank you or I don't say thank you for it. That's not the purpose, right? And so sometimes, again, we get taught lessons like that of, well, why are you really giving me this? Are you expecting me to say thank you? Are you expecting me to fawn all over you and to stroke your ego? Or are you truly giving it from a place of unconditional love? And, again, I think those are things for us to kind of consider and stop and be aware of, and again, we don't get it right all the time. We don't get it right all the time. But the times when I've gotten it right, I can feel it.
Mhm.
And when people do it for me, I can feel it, whether they're sincere or not. Because it's the same thing. I've been taught, and I believe this too. It's like, you want to give me a gift, but you're giving it to me for the wrong reason. I don't want your gift. I don't want it. And in fact, when people give me gifts out of obligation, out of, I real life example, people that I know, it was Christmas time. We're coming up on the holidays again, right? And so a lot of people feel this obligation to give gifts. Well, when I literally had somebody regift me something and I knew it was regifted. How did I know that? Because there was still dust on the box. Okay. And so they found something in their house and they just regifted it to me because they felt this obligation to give me a Christmas gift. I didn't want it. I could tell the energy was wrong with it. So what did I do? I gave it away, right? I
You
donated
regifted
it.
it to somebody
I
else.
regifted it. Not to someone else. I gave it to a charity, right? I gave it to
Uh,
as a donation to a charity so they could sell it. But I could feel it, right? And it's interesting because this was a family that my partner and I knew, and when we brought the stuff home, it just sat. We just set it like in this one part of our house, and it just sat there. And I finally looked at it, and I'm like, "Are you sensing what I'm sensing about this?" And she's like, "Yep." I'm like, "Okay, it's out of here." Right? But you can see the difference. Why? It's the energy behind it, right? When you give a gift out of obligation, it's icky, nasty energy that goes with it. When you give something out of love for no reason other than to do it, there's good energy with it, right? And I'll tell this story, Brad, because I'm just going to tell it anyway. So when I moved to Sedona, I don't let people know where I live, right? I don't give out my address. And all of a sudden, I go to my mailbox and we have like bank of mailboxes. It's not at the house. And I go and I open it up and there's a package in there. And I'm like, well, this is weird. And I look and it's from Life is Good. And I'm like, that's funny. I didn't order anything from Life is Good. And so I come back home and I open it and I'm like, huh, I don't even think there wasn't anything in it, right? Because it just came right from there. And I'm like, this is interesting. I wonder who did this to me, right? And it was Brad, my friend Brad, that I love, for whatever reason, all of a sudden felt like he was supposed to send me something. And so he did. I didn't give him my address, but he figured it out, right? And up shows this. Now, that was a gift given with love that I cherish. I love the shirt. I love the hat that Brad gave me. Why? Because he gave it with love. And so I can receive it as love, right? And again, because of who I am, when I found out it was Brad, I thanked him, but it wasn't to stroke his ego, but it was to let him know how much I love and appreciate him for thinking about me and for doing something like that for me because he knows that I like that brand. I've worn that brand for a lot of years. right?
Mhm.
So, um, yeah.
Another really good example is your kids. How often do you give them gifts, do things for them, even if they annoy the living hell out of you, you know, but you still do things for them anyway. You still feed them, you still all these things. Why? Is that unconditional love? Some of you may do it because you know you don't want children's services coming and knocking at your door and things like that, and or maybe you feel some obligation because they're your kids. But I think for the majority of people, you do things for your kids because you just unconditionally love them, no matter how rotten they are, no matter how much they refuse to mind or how much trouble they are for you, how expensive they are, all those other things, you still do stuff for them anyway. You still love them anyway, regardless. And that to me is a great example of unconditional love, of this idea that we're talking about of, you know, you give them things, you're doing things for them, not because you're expecting them to give you something back, but just because you love them.
Well, I think it's one of those too where it's a good way to maybe make the distinction here. Because again, I'm hoping everybody who's listening, you're doing things for your kids out of unconditional love. But a lot of parents give gifts or rewards for behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And you can watch how the kids and the parents in those situations how they react, right? So you know the parents will, you know, you go clean your room and I'll go buy you ice cream, or you do, you know, do this,
Mm-hmm.
and what it starts to create is, again, that's not necessarily the right energy mix. And so what ends up happening is those children and the parent relationship is different. It's a quid
Mm-hmm.
pro quo. It's like, no, you want me to do that? You better go buy me a new whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all the spoiled, rotten, you know, I can't remember what that stupid TV reality show was, but like My Sweet 16 or something. And it was like all
Mm-hmm.
these, you know, rich, bratty girls whose daddies were buying them Ferraris for their 16th birthday. You know, that's a different kind of giving, even to your children,
Mm-hmm.
than just unconditional, right? And so I
Yeah.
think it's, and that's where I think it is. You know, we've got to be careful because it's a very fine line. It's a very subtle difference between the two, and that's why it's a practice. That's why you have to keep doing it. That's why you have to
Mm-hmm.
keep having awareness, making sure that you're setting your intention properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. I mean, when I give gifts, when I give ayni, sometimes I get a thank you, sometimes I don't. And when I don't, guess what happens? The Tanal part of me tries to go, hold it, did you give that with the right spirit, with the right love?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just like Don Juan not saying thank you of, hey, I just want you to get in your head, Jason,
Mm-hmm.
and realize that everything is okay and not go down that path, right? Um, but it makes one more aware
Mm-hmm.
and more focused on the intention, which is the goal. That's the practice. Doing it with the right intention, with unconditional love, just for no reason other than doing it. And like you said, sometimes it'll come from inspiration. Because I know, you know, that example I shared with you from Brad, and I think you sent me a Ram shirt beforehand too,
Mm-hmm.
you know, earlier on. And it was just kind of like you just had the impression like, Jason needs this shirt.
Yep.
Okay, Jason didn't know he needed this shirt, but
When you win the Super Bowl next, this trophy next to it, you definitely needed that shirt. So,
I did need that shirt because it was a photo opportunity, right? Yeah, I made sure and
hmm
wore that shirt to take a picture with the Super Bowl trophy. So,
hmm
um, yeah, yeah.
but it's, I mean, it's a good point though. It's a very, very fine line, and that's one of the tricky parts about the spiritual path, is there's a lot of really fine lines between things that sometimes are really hard to distinguish and we can kind of get muddled up, because it's very fine between I'm doing something because I feel an obligation to, because I like the feeling that I get when I do it because I want some sort of recognition of giving. You know, I want to thank you. I want somebody to acknowledge that I've done something for them. I want my name on the side of the building, those kind of things. And simply giving or doing just because like I said, kids are a great example of that. Um, so the way that I knew, and again, this just kind of hit me yesterday as I was driving, and really fully kind of flushed this out this morning before we got on this call today, um, is because I have this. uh, It's not really, it's not an urge, it's not the right word. There's just this feeling, a desire, whatever, to serve people. It's not it's not a I want to do this because I want to get money for it. It's not that I feel that I need to do this because I'm going to get something in return for it. There's just something inside that says we want to serve, we want to help people, and this is how I know, not just on an intellectual level, but I actually know that there is such thing as this unconditional love, this altruism, this ayni, this doing something just for the sake of doing it, because I don't anticipate getting anything back for it. Like I don't know why I think this. I don't know why that these feelings, these thoughts are coming to me. All I know is that I've got this desire and I've had this for some time now. So it's not like it just happened yesterday, but there's this desire in me to help people. That's one reason why I started this podcast. You know, I brought this up to Jason to start this cast. It's not because that I thought, oh, I want my name on to be a podcast person or, you know, or anything like that. It was because I had this desire to help. Same thing with the spiritual campfire that we do. It's not that I think that there's something I'm going to get out of it. It's not that we're making money off of this thing at all. You know, the investment is very minimal. And again, it's more of just so that you as a participant have something invested in this to make sure you show up in things. It's definitely not making any money off of it, but it's just based on this desire just to serve and to do things for other people to help them. And I don't, again, I can't explain why or where it comes from. It's just there and comes. But to me, that tells me that there is such thing as this true altruism, this unconditional love, this pure desire to help others.
Well, I'll give you a little hint, Brad, of where it comes from. It comes from love and it comes from Dharma. And so, what does that mean? Right? Is that when we truly start to love and to connect and want to connect with fellow human beings, Pachamama, you know, winged ones, four-leggeds,
No
cosmic
leggeds, lizards,
cosmic
things. Yeah.
families, no lizards, creepy crawly things, whatever it is.
Yeah.
When one really starts to come to life from a place of love, you have this desire to serve. You have this desire to give love, whether it's reciprocated or not. And in fact, you know, most of, again, you know, we can look at things as gifts and things that we buy, right? A shirt, a hat. Well, did Brad really give me a shirt and hat? Well, yeah, in the 3D he did. But what did he really give me? He gave me love. It just showed up in the form of a hat and shirt, right? And so this desire comes that as we start to love more, we want to give that love to other people. And it also comes in, you know, as we become more and more in tune spiritually, if you will, into our intuition, to our higher self, we start to realize that there are certain gifts that we have. We start to realize that there are certain purposes and reasons why we came to this earth. We start to realize some of the things that were in the blueprint that we chose, right? Jason's coming to earth to do blah, 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 right? I got a whole checklist of things that I agreed to do when I came to this earth for this round. And so it's also comes at that point as we start to know ourselves better and start to remember, we start to remember what our dharma is and what we are here to do. And we do it not for money. We do it not for fame. We do it not for recognition. We do it not for self ego, right? We do it because that's what we do and we can not do it, right? And when you can start to get to that point in your life, things totally change. And I think again, this is why too, we talk about gratitude and we talk about love and we talk about sharing light and all these different things that a lot of people kind of poo-poo, but it's like this is the work. You do those little things, you start connecting more with everything, right? You start loving more, and these things start to click into place for you. But the only way to get there is to do the work. And I think that's one of the reasons why ayni is kind of a cosmic law and principle is, when we follow this, when we practice this, when we come more in tune to it, right? We're opening ourselves up as well spiritually. We're completing our mission that we have here. And it's just one practice. Okay, what's your intention behind it? Are you actually doing it with love? Can you practice it? Right? And again, it's like even if you get it wrong, just try practicing it. Maybe give somebody a gift. Maybe just send somebody a text out of the blue that's not asking them for anything, but hey, Brad, I was thinking about you today and I just am sending you some love and a big hug virtually. And that's it. Not expecting anything, not asking anything. Maybe it's a thank you card that you write. I don't know. Maybe it's smiling at somebody in the grocery store. It can be any of these things because really, ayni is about love. So, what are ways that you can give love unconditionally? And you're practicing ayni when you do that because it doesn't have to be a gift, it doesn't have to be a donation, it doesn't have to be, anything of economic value. Some of the greatest gifts that people give are homemade gifts of food, of something you made, right? Because a part of you is definitely included in that if you did it with the right attitude.
Mhm. Yeah, every night when I fix dinner, I always sort of jokingly, it started jokingly, but I tell my daughter, especially because I have my daughter try to help to learn how to cook. But I tell her to make sure that she puts in a lot of love in the cook recipe when she's fixing it, because that's a sign of love, fixing food for others.
It's
So I
a
want to try
form
to
of,
teach her that.
yeah, it's a form of ayni, and it's actually one of the most important, simple things that we can do every single day with intention.
Hmm.
Put love into the food you cook, connect with the food, right? Give thanks, be grateful for the things that are becoming a part of you because you're ingesting it, right?
Hmm.
That is a spiritual practice, right? Being grateful,
Hmm.
praying over, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, but giving gratitude, making meals with love, right? Instead of
Hmm.
being frenzied and fuck this, fuck that, kind of a thing. I mean, again, that's why I have a hard time eating at restaurants now. Not because of the food, but because of the people who are making the food. Some of it's the food, because I don't know for sure where it's from, but a lot of it is the people making the food, right? Because if you see
Hmm.
what goes on in the kitchen, it's like, I don't want that energy in my food. And so we choose to do most stuff here, right? But little things like that. That's why even like my washing the dishes, I'm sure
Hmm.
people laugh like, oh, come on. No, washing the dishes can be a very spiritual practice. with the right intention and
Mhm.
the right love that goes into it, and what you're saying and what you're doing and what you're thinking about while you're doing it, you can feel it, right? You can feel the difference, right? When I do it that way, and the kitchen is like singing, like, we're so happy. Jason just did the dishes and he was loving on us, and we're going to love on him the next time that he puts food on us, you know? And I know it sounds a little hokey, but it ain't hokey, right? Everything is energy. Everything has energy. Everything about us is about energy. And
Mhm.
so the more that we love and are in loving energy, the better everything goes.
I think that's a great way to end the episode,
And
talking
so
about
it
love.
is. And
Yeah.
so it is. Because I think, to me, that's one of the big ahas I've had more about ayni is it's really about love. Love is behind it. And if we think about it that way, and we whatever we do, whether it's washing the dishes, cooking meals, giving a gift, giving our time
Mhm.
to other people who maybe are lonely, any of those things, it's, when we do it really from a place of unconditional love, expecting nothing in return, doesn't matter whether the people accept it, doesn't matter whether the people say thank you, doesn't matter whether they do anything about it or not, it just doesn't matter. If we're doing it from the right place, then that's the point.
Mhm.
So, yeah, funny little word that's so profound and such an important part of walking the spiritual path.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Go out this week and share some love and be in love. And again, like I said, this is seems like you said, it seems hokey. It seems very trivial, irrelevant. But I mean, like this is a lot of what the path is.
Yeah.
It's things like this. Um,
Yeah. And never underestimate the power of a simple thing. But because they're simple, people won't do them and therefore do not experience the power. So, this is one of those things. Seems simple, it seems hokey, but I promise you, when you do it, you will see a difference. You will very much see a difference in your life and in the life of people around you as well. So, with that, everybody, thank you for listening, and many blessings to you on your journey as well. And may ayni start to fill your life even more. And with that, we will see you on the next episode. Have a great week, everybody.
See ya.